Hey everyone, welcome back to another Cultivated Culture success story. I have Paula Jackler here, and she is the Director of Commercial and Network Marketing at Talkspace. Paula, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. And the pleasure is all mine. And I'm really excited to share your story because it has been a bit of a roller coaster. So, if we rewind all the way back, I'll just give a quick synopsis. But you and I caught up for a drink. You were in New Jersey, I was in New York. We got connected through the email list. And at the time, you were doing SEO and you kind of wanted to make a shift. You wanted to stay in digital, but you wanted to work for a company that had a little bit more of a cause, like a humanitarian cause behind it, right? But you also didn't want to go to a nonprofit where it's tough to move up the ladder, salaries are lower, etc. So we had to find a company where you could do digital. There was a humanitarian cause, but they were also making money. You know, they were trying to be profitable, and that was the goal. And we did find you that, but then it didn't last as long as you might have hoped, right? And so you got an email that basically told you, hey, your last day is on Friday because the funding ran out, and you were kind of stuck back in square one. But then a couple weeks later, leveraging some of the tools and strategies here, doing some outreach, also getting some leads generated from your resume, your LinkedIn profile, et cetera, you were able to land a job just 3 weeks, roughly 3 to 4 weeks after you got that notice. So that is a crazy story. And I'm really excited to have you share it because I think a lot of people have been in a situation where they get some unexpected news from the company and they have to make a pivot. But also, you, for the first job, I know you basically took my strategies and played them to a T, and it worked out pretty well. So let's go all the way back to the beginning of that. Give us a little bit of background on you, where you're from, kind of what you did, and then kind of lead us into that SEO role that you were in.
Okay, awesome. So I am originally from Brazil. I moved here 7 years ago on a study abroad program. And then I fell in love with New York City and I decided that I wanted to stay here for good.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then I had to figure out how to make that happen, right? And at the time when I moved here was when Alicia Keys' song was like all over the place, saying like, if you make it here, you can make it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that I was going to try and make it here because then I could choose like whatever I wanted to do. So the process wasn't that easy, right? For me to stay here legally, I had to get a student visa. So I went back to a community college and then I applied to business school. Just to maintain my visa. And when I was in business school, that's when I came across corporate social responsibility. And that's when I fell in love with humanitarian causes and actually using profit for a greater good. And at the time, everybody told me like it's not possible for you to get a job in that field.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have enough experience, you don't know a lot of people, but I knew that I wanted to do something that actually helps other people and helps to make the planet a better place. So I kept that in the back of my mind. Right after business school, I actually got an offer through referrals to an SEO agency in northern New Jersey, and I was a content strategist there. And it was a very good experience. I learned a ton from the owner of the agency, and I was growing like professionally. But again, like inside of me, I really wanted to do something that added value to people who actually needed. And that's when I came across your content. Being honest with you, I still don't remember how I signed up for the list, but I remember that every Monday morning, I would get this email and I was like, you know what? I actually can make this. I can make the leap. I just need a little bit of courage and being smart. And I don't recall, and I don't know if you remember either, like there was one particular email you sent that's when I reached out to you and I was like, this touched me. Let's connect. And that's when we met each other. So when we met each other, you were so wonderful and you were telling me that I could do whatever I wanted to do as long as I planned for it. And I remember that. Like there's a framework, there are a couple of things that you can do, certain steps you can follow to make that leap. And I followed your advice and I went online and I started looking for social enterprises, like companies that are profitable, but they use part of the revenue to help social and sustainable causes. And I came across a company on Instagram, and I was just in love. So the whole premise of the company was they would sell a water bottle, and for every bottle you bought, you would give 5 years of clean water to a person in Africa. And being from Brazil and having grown up in Brazil in the 90s, clean water is something that it's like near and dear to my heart. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to connect with them. I want to join them, and I want to bring clean water to people who actually need it. So, using your advice, I reached out to the CEO of the company, and I was not asking for a job. I was just saying, hey, I came across your profile on Instagram. Clean water is really a topic that I love. So I would love to talk to you more about it. I gave him a little bit of my background too. I told him that I was from Brazil, that I was working for an SEO company, but that I wanted to do marketing for the greater good. And he replied to me. So he replied to me, and we started like hanging out, and we would talk about the business, and I started giving them a lot of valuable advice. So for example, they weren't tracking anything on social media. Like they didn't know what metrics to track. Their Google Analytics wasn't set up. So I started helping them out with that without saying like I want a job or anything. It was really because I was passionate about the cause and the mission. And that happened, I think that was like 6 months that we kept on talking to each other. And whenever I saw him, I gave him tips. And I created a whole digital marketing project for them. And then one day when I was like, you know what, I actually want to leave my job and I'm going to start looking for jobs at a social enterprise. He was the first one who said, wait, if you're going somewhere, like join us. And that's pretty much what happened. So the whole process took between 6 to 8 months. The job that I landed wasn't advertised anywhere. It was like pretty much tailored for me and my skills. And that we like in some of your content, you talk about that, like 75% of the jobs are not even like advertised online. And that's exactly what happened. So like maybe there were other people that could have done the job, I would have applied for the job, but they didn't even know that was like a possibility. So yeah, so that's like the first part of the story, and that's how I landed the job.
Awesome. I love it. And exactly what you mentioned, 75 to 80% of jobs aren't available online. And if you can showcase that value ahead of time, why would they hire anybody else, right? Because they know what you can bring to the table. And I love that. So just taking it back to talk through some of the strategies, when you reach out to the CEO, did you say you reached out on Instagram or did you reach out via email? How did you initially get in touch?
So I came across their profile on Instagram, and then I started following them and leaving comments. But then when I went to to visit their website, that's when I saw like the entire team and the CEO. And since he had a name that wasn't popular, as soon as I Googled his name, his email address came right up. Awesome. So I was like, okay, so I'm gonna reach out to him. So that's how the whole process of first reaching out to him worked.
Cool. And when you set up that initial meeting, was that his idea or did you ask to have a conversation? How did you end up landing a meeting, getting some of his time and being able to chat with him?
So first, I thought like the company was originally from England, and I didn't know that they had expanded to the US. So when I reached out to him was just like, I wanted to talk more about the company, and yeah, if I moved to Europe, that would be amazing. But when I reached out to him, he said, I'm actually moving to New York City. We're in San Francisco right now. We're taking the headquarters to New York City. Let's meet up in person. I would love to talk to you in person. So I think, and actually we exchanged emails 2 to 3 times prior to actually saying, let's do this in person. But I think it was more like after talking to him was his idea, like, let's meet up. And again, the tip that I have is like, once I reached out to him, I made sure he knew that I was very familiar with the company. So before reaching out to him, I actually Googled the company and tried to learn a little bit about their history. and also like fun facts that I gleaned from Instagram. So I put that on the email too. So I would say it's like a humble brag type of thing, but like it would be hard for him not to reach back, right?
Awesome.
Because I was
Yeah.
acknowledging their success. I was paying attention to things they were doing and important details, and also conveying how passionate I was about the cause.
And you just asked for a conversation, right? You talk about a potential job? I think you mentioned that you didn't. It was strictly like, hey, I think what you're doing is very cool. It means a lot to me. I'd love to talk more.
Exactly. That was
Awesome.
exactly it. And that's one of your advices too. Like you give before you ask anything.
Hmm.
So I was like, I want to learn more about what you're doing. And it's so wonderful. I want to learn more about you. And one thing that it's like, it's not manipulative, but the truth is like people like talking about themselves,
Hmm.
you know? So if you ask people to tell their story, that's like,
They
of
will.
course, they want to, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that was it. And no, I didn't ask for anything, like not for a job and for opportunities, connections, like none of that. Just I want to learn more about you and the company and the wonderful things you're doing.
Awesome. And so I think when people get over that initial fear of reaching out, they're comfortable sending the emails, and that's all good. But then somebody says, yes, I will have a conversation, and the fear kind of sets back in. So when you had that initial conversation with him, one, how did you prepare? And two, how did the conversation go? Did you do a lot of asking? Did you have to steer the conversation? Was he very forthcoming? Like, tell us a little bit more about how you prepped for it, and then how you actually handle the conversation itself to get some more of those insights that you could add value against.
Okay, so the first thing that I did was actually like deep dig about the company. So my first when I first reached out to him, I Googled them and I saw their website and social media accounts. But before the actual meeting, I read every single article that I could find on them. So they had been published on major publications, which was good. But I also found like little like smaller blogs and very like green thumb publications because it was like in the social innovation space. So
Hmm.
everything that I could find, I wrote it down and I actually had like a little document
Cheat
where
sheet.
I had like exactly
Nice.
where I like interesting facts that I could bring up again during the conversation. And also like I didn't want to ask him anything that I could find online. You know, like so for example, he launched the company in 2003. I didn't want to go and say like, oh, so when did you start the company? Like that information is already available. So
Hmm.
I was trying to kind of like do my homework and have a smart conversation because again, like we only have one opportunity to make a great first impression, right? So I wanted to just like show to him that I am like smart and I was interested in all of that. So I did a lot of preparation. A funny thing though, before our meeting, I don't know if you're familiar with Amy Cuddy, the Harvard psychology professor. She has a TED
Did you do the
talk.
power pose?
I did.
Awesome.
I did because even though I'm a friendly person,
Hmm.
I tend to warm up after I get to know somebody. So at first, like I'm not a super bubbly person, and I'm not going to be like super forthcoming. I have the self consciousness, and I think also like being an immigrant, I think like more people will relate to it. I was very self conscious about my accent, and I was like, what if he doesn't understand me? And what if I don't understand him because he's British, right? So like this whole like self consciousness and insecurity, and doing the power pose actually helped.
Hmm.
So by the time like I sat down to talk to him, I was feeling confident, and we even joked like about accents. We're like, people with accent actually get along like and bond right away. So it was really nice for us to kind of like break the ice. Um, and he was a very, very forthcoming and bubbly person. So he was like leading the conversation. He never made me feel uncomfortable. So I would say like I lucked out. But for people like if he wasn't like that, if he was a very shy person, I did my homework and I would be able to steer the conversation based on all of the things that I had looked up already.
Awesome. And I mean that's textbook. You did a great job, and obviously it led to some information that you were able to add value against. So my first question is, you said that you started hanging out and chatting a little more frequently. What did that look like? Like, how often would you say you were in touch with him? And did you usually start those conversations each time, or would he sometimes send you emails out of the blue? I guess a lot of people always ask me, how often should I be reaching out? And I don't want to annoy them and questions like that. So how did you handle that? Like, how did you know when was the right time to reach out and what was the right amount of space in between and all that good stuff?
Okay, so in order to answer that question, I have to go back to the first meeting. Pay attention to whatever the person's saying, because if you pay attention and you actively listen to what the person's saying, you have a lot of information to follow up on. So for example, whenever I saw something that was interesting, I remember when we met each other, Warby Parker was just shifting their strategy, right? And for everybody in social innovation, Warby Parker was like, oh yeah, we all want to be Warby Parker. And all of a sudden Warby Parker was just saying, well, we're going to be more into technology now. Like, we're still going to have help people, but that's not going to be our focus. And there was like this long article on fastcompany.com about it. So I followed up with him and said, did you see that Warby Parker's shifting their strategy? So that was a good thing. And then whenever he would see something online that it related to our conversation, he would follow up too. Again, because he's a very extroverted person, that helped too. And also we exchanged numbers. So we would text each other more frequently than sending emails. I think that was a very good thing too. You can have like shorter and more informal conversations if you're texting somebody, right? Like email, we always feel a little like, how long should it be? How short should it be? Like what my tone of voice should be. So I think like talking to him via text helped. So most of the time when I reached out to him, I don't have a particular frame, like time frame. It's more like whenever you see something valuable and interesting that relates to whatever that person does and what you talked about, reach out. Like don't feel self-conscious or afraid you're bothering that person, because you're actually adding value. So either for example, the Warby Parker situation, he hadn't seen that at the time. So that was like, oh, that's really nice, and I want to learn more about this. And other things, when I reached out to him, he had already seen it, so we would just discuss it. So, and also when I was reaching out to him, I was not asking for anything still. I was not asking for a job. I was not asking questions. It was really like, everything that I have to offer right now, I'll just offer to you. So we would talk, I would say like every week we would talk via text, and we saw each other every 3 weeks or so. So yeah.
Awesome. I love that you got the digits. We're going to need to do like a follow-up, like, Paula's pickup artist moves to get founders' numbers. So that's awesome. It's great that, I mean, the fact that you went that far, but also found ways to actively keep the conversation going is great. I love the fact that, I mean, you mentioned texting weekly, meeting up every couple of weeks. I think a lot of people try to put like a specific formula on it, like 5 days is when I have to reach out. I like that you kind of kept it more natural, whatever felt right. So awesome. And a little bit further down the road, we took it a step further. You took it a step further from just sending articles to actually putting together this. Was it a dashboard for them?
No, I actually, we started talking, and he would tell me some challenges that he would have. And then we started talking like specifically about his business. So like, what are certain things that you should be doing? And it's always easier. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. I know I didn't. When you're an outsider, you have a fresh perspective on things. So even though you're not a specialist in whatever they're doing, when they share something with you, you're looking at it for the first time, you bring like a fresh perspective and new ideas to whatever it is a person's talking. So I would say like, don't ever be afraid of telling your ideas and your opinions, because most of the time they're going to value that. So when we started talking about this, and I was on the SEO side. I was working for an agency and I wanted to be doing more analysis. So that was like a win-win, right? Because I told him like, oh, no problem. Like I can do that,
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't something that I did on a daily basis. So I was honing my skills at the same time. So I put this whole like strategic plan for digital marketing on how to track certain metrics and how to actually notice if that's impacting your bottom line. After we were talking for like 5 months, that's when he actually gave me access to the Google Analytics. And that's when I started like
Mm-hmm.
making some changes on it. But again, it was a smaller company. Like that's not going to happen if you're trying to talk to Google or Microsoft. Like nobody's going to give you the Google Analytics, right? But if it's like a smaller company, you can definitely do it. And even if they don't give you access to certain tools, like there are a lot of other ways you can go around and actually build something as well. So yeah, so that's what I did. And again, like the conversation started flowing naturally. And I was being a little selfish too. Like I wanted to work on things that I wasn't working on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And were you ever worried at any point that he would like take all this work that you'd done and just kind of run off with it and implement it and then never talk to you again?
So that's what one of my best friends told me. She was like, "Why are you spending so much time? He can just take like you're working for free. You're spending your time. Like they should be paying you for that stuff. That's high level marketing consultancy." My view on the things was just like I am learning and I'm practicing things that I don't do on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis. And also, I'm a very spiritual person. So I believe that whatever you give and whatever you put out in the universe, you're going to receive it back. So if he took my stuff and ran away with it, that was going to be on him, not
Mm-hmm.
me. Like I was actually helping people. So my advice would be do it, do it for you and do it just like for the sake of doing something. Like if you have a right behavior, that's on you. But if somebody else do something wrong, that's on them. Like don't worry about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it because that's the exact attitude that you want to have. You want to give, 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 then ask. And you did exactly that. You ended up with a job at the company, which fulfilled all the criteria you wanted before. But then shortly after joining, there was a little bit of a hiccup, right? So tell
Yeah.
us about that.
Yeah, I always joke that like my life is a Mexican soap opera. There's always like not drama, but like it's there's never a dull moment.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened? I was really happy. I landed the job. I started working on a few things. It was my first time on a fast growing startup.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really like growth on steroids. And I was a growth marketer. So that was my job, right? So, and I loved it. And I think for me, one of the things, like when you're in the social innovation space, you can actually like right away see your impact. So I knew that if I was doing a paid social campaign that sold 100 bottles, that is 500 years like worth of clean water somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like a good motivator. But what happened was last December, I went on vacation. And then when I came back was like Christmas Day. And then that following day was Boxing Day. So because they're a British company, we observed it. So on that Tuesday, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have to talk. Are you available?" Yes, I'm available. Let's talk. So we're having cash problems and I'm not going to be able to afford you and the rest of the team in the upcoming year. So your last day is Friday.
Mm.
And I was like, what? Like, so I'm going to be completely honest. And I was honest with them too. My first reaction was like, I was angry as hell,
Yep.
you know,
Sure.
um, because cash problems, like it's not something that happens overnight. You see it coming, right? So my first reaction was like, I just went on vacation for 2 weeks. You knew you wouldn't be able to afford me. Why didn't you at least told me before my vacation? Like I would have saved the money. I would have had the time to look for another job. I can't find another job in 4 days. So my first instinct was like I was really angry,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was also disappointed in myself because I had a very good job before that. and I left everything to do like good for the world. And why? Like, why did I take this risk? I had a stable job. I was making a decent amount of money. Why did I just like threw everything up just because I wanted to find a job like helping people? So I was really blaming myself. And what happened was now I'm kind of like a pro on doing like cold emailing people. So I came across the Instagram of another woman. She's the director of partnerships at Tumblr, and she's also Brazilian. So I reached out to her and I was like, here's what happened. I left my stable job, found this job at a startup, and I am getting laid off. And like, why? Like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? It took me 6 to 8 months to find this job. Like, if I start the process right now, what's going to happen? So I was freaking out. Um, and she told me something that was like the best advice. It was like, don't you ever be afraid of taking risks again. That's why they're risks. Like sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but you have to keep on taking risks. And I was like, you know what? Fine. So I'll do it. So my looking for a job the second time was a little bit different because I was on a time crunch, right? I did not have 6 months available to create a relationship and gain their trust and bring value. Like I needed a job ASAP. So my first reaction was I reached out to all of my mentors and some peers, like people that I trust. And I told them, like, here's what happened. The company didn't work out. I need a job. So they sent my resume to a few places. And then via LinkedIn, I was looking for jobs. And I was really, because of my SEO experience, I was kind of like getting a pro into like optimizing my application and using the right keywords. Mm-hmm. So that worked. Like, and I would say like, I would never encourage anybody to look for a job online. But if something happens and you absolutely have to, yep. Always use the keywords that they're saying like on the job description. So I got a lot of offers to go back to the agency side and do more SEO. And I got an offer from a very reputable agency in New York City. But that all happened in 2 weeks. I would say like 17 days tops. So it's my looking for jobs, talking to mentors, talking to peers, going to phone interviews, going to an in-person interview. And then a recruiter showed up and she was like, your experience is amazing. There's a company that I think you would really fit in, and it's Talkspace. So do you want to go for an interview? And I was like, sure. Yeah. So, and that like, I was very far along in the recruiting process on the SEO agency. So I had already done a phone interview, a test, an in-person interview. So I needed just like one more in-person interview, but it was like, I like what Talkspace is doing. Let me go check it out. And then they made an offer. And then I had 2 offers. One for the SEO side, and it's something that I was really comfortable doing. I can do like SEO with my eyes closed, right? And then I have this offer for a very high position at a fast growing startup. I have never done anything related to healthcare. So, and that's when that advice of don't be afraid of taking risks came into place. So I went back to them and said, hey, I have an offer from this SEO agency and they're offering me X amount of money. Mm-hmm. And they literally said, no, we want you. So they made a counter offer and I ended up making like a lot more money than I would have otherwise.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it is a very challenging position that helps me grow every day. I know like on the SEO side, I would have been not as challenged. I would be on my comfort zone and I would just like plateau for a while. So now I actually like every day I'm pushed out of my comfort zone and I'm growing.
Awesome. That's incredible. And this is one of my favorite stories because one of the reasons that I started the site in general and made it different from a lot of the other like recruiting will help place you type of companies is that once you learn the process, you can rinse and repeat forever for any job that you want. Or if something, or if you land in a similar situation where, you know, something happens, you're laid off, you're fired, whatever, you have the tools and you know exactly what you need to do in order to land something else quickly. 17 days might be a record. I think I think it might be. We'll have to double check. But Paula, thank you so much for sharing all this. To wrap things up, what would your number one piece of advice be to people who are out there listening right now and looking for a job?
Believe in yourself always. Like, you have so much to offer, and there is somebody out there looking for exactly what you have to offer. So I know that looking for a job is a very overwhelming process, and sometimes we tend to have some self-doubt. Just don't. You know, like, own your stuff, keep on studying, keep on growing, and you'll be able to find somebody out there that is looking exactly for what you have to do. And if I could give a second advice, is like,
Sure.
Sometimes life is not perfect, right? Like, I can find the dream job and then get laid off. Always bounce back.
Awesome. 2-for-1 advice deal. I love it. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, Paula. I really appreciate all the knowledge you shared, telling everybody your story, and we will talk to you very soon. Take care.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.